Have you ever dismissed someone based on their uniform? When wealthy, privileged Eliza Harrington mocks Marcus Johnson, the quiet school janitor, she has no idea that beneath his humble appearance lies a shocking truth that will transform her world forever. Why would a brilliant medical mind choose to be invisible? What happens when the masks we wear are suddenly stripped away? As their worlds collide at prestigious Westfield Academy, both lives will change in ways neither could imagine. Dear viewer, watch or listen this full story to witness this emotional journey that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the people you pass by every day. And, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The polished marble floors of Westfield Academy gleamed under Marcus Johnson's mop. 29 years had taught him much about invisibility, how to move through spaces without disturbing the air, how to avert his gaze at precisely the right moment, how to make his 6-foot frame seem smaller in the presence of those who preferred not to acknowledge him. "Excuse me," he murmured as students barreled past, their laughter echoing through the hallway. Not one turned to look at him. Their eyes slid past as if the blue jumpsuit rendered him transparent. Marcus wiped beads of sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. 3 weeks at Westfield Academy had established the pattern: polite indifference from most faculty, complete invisibility to the students. Their blindness wasn't malicious, merely the natural result of a lifetime spent viewing certain roles as beneath notice. A flash of platinum blonde caught his eye, Eliza Harrington, moving through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. Even without knowing her name, Marcus would have recognized wealth in her bearing. It wasn't just the designer clothes or the perfectly styled hair, it was the certainty with which she moved, the ingrained belief that the world would accommodate her. Marcus maneuvered his cart against the wall, creating more space in the crowded hallway. He'd learned to anticipate the flow of bodies, to become part of the architecture rather than an obstacle. Eliza's laugh cut through the noise, sharp, practiced, and performative as she turned to the circle of friends surrounding her. They stopped just feet away from where Marcus stood. "I can't believe Professor Reed expected me to actually do the lab myself," she said, rolling her eyes as her friends nodded sympathetically. "That's what lab assistants are for." "Totally unfair," a boy in a Westfield lacrosse jacket agreed. "Your dad literally donated the entire science wing." Marcus kept his eyes down, focusing on replacing a trash bag. The students continued their conversation as if he were simply another fixture in the hallway, their voices neither lowered nor censored in his presence. "Speaking of the science wing, I need to throw this away." Eliza crumpled a paper in her manicured hand and tossed it toward the trash can Marcus had just emptied. It bounced off the rim and landed at his feet. Marcus bent down to retrieve it, his movements deliberate, dignified. "Oops," Eliza said, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Looks like I've created job security for you." She turned to her friends with a smirk. "At least someone appreciates my contribution to the workforce." Laughter rippled through the group as they moved away. Marcus remained expressionless as he placed the crumpled paper into the trash bag, his eyes momentarily catching the equation scrawled across it, a flawed approach to enzyme kinetics that he could have corrected in seconds. "You missed a spot," Eliza called over her shoulder, pointing to a non-existent mark on the floor. Fresh laughter erupted as they disappeared around the corner. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. When he opened them again, the hallway had mostly cleared. He returned to his mop, his movements methodical and precise. The rhythmic sound of water against marble became a meditation of sorts. In the empty hallway, Marcus's face relaxed, and for a brief moment, a different man emerged, thoughtful, focused, and carrying a dignity that had nothing to do with his blue jumpsuit. His eyes, when not deliberately downcast, revealed intelligence and purpose that would have startled anyone who bothered to look closely. As the afternoon sunlight filtered through high windows, Marcus Johnson continued his work, invisible to most, but seeing everything. Eliza Harrington's alarm chimed with a gentle, expensive sound, nothing so jarring as a beep or buzz would be permitted in her meticulously designed bedroom. The morning sun filtered through custom silk drapes, illuminating a space that had been featured in a luxury home magazine the previous year. "Eliza, darling. Your breakfast is getting cold," her mother's voice called from downstairs, the slight edge of impatience barely concealed beneath the sing-song tone. "Coming," Eliza replied, though she had no intention of rushing. The world operated on Eliza Harrington's schedule, a lesson she'd learned early and embraced completely. Half an hour later, she descended the sweeping staircase of the Harrington mansion, dressed in a casual outfit that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. "You're going to be late," her father, James Harrington, remarked without looking up from his financial newspaper. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his posture rigid even at the breakfast table. "Fashionably late," Eliza corrected, dropping a kiss on his cheek before taking a seat. "Besides, they're hardly going to start without me. The Harrington name is literally on the building." James lowered his paper, fixing his daughter with a steely gaze. "That name means something, Eliza. It opens doors, yes, but it also carries expectations." Eliza suppressed an eye roll. "I know, Dad. Excellence in all things. The Harrington legacy. Don't worry, I'm maintaining a perfect GPA." "See that you do," James replied, returning to his paper. "I have another board meeting with the school trustees today. Apparently, there are budget concerns regarding some new educational initiative. As if we haven't been generous enough." Later that morning, Eliza sat in the student lounge, surrounded by her usual entourage. Her biochemistry notes were spread across the table, though she paid them little attention. "I can't figure out why this experimental design isn't working," she complained, pushing away a complex diagram. "Professor Chen keeps saying my hypothesis is sound but my methodology is flawed." "Maybe ask Tyler. He's pretty good at biochem," suggested one of her friends, a quiet girl who primarily served as an audience for Eliza's monologues. Eliza wrinkled her nose. "Tyler Roberts? The scholarship kid? No, thanks. I'd rather figure it out myself than ask for help from someone who probably shops at department stores." The group laughed on cue, though a few exchanged glances. Eliza's elitism had grown more pronounced recently, even by Westfield standards. "Besides," Eliza continued, "Daddy says networking is about connecting with the right people. You never know which connections will be valuable later in life." She emphasized the word "right," while pointedly ignoring a group of students from more modest backgrounds who were studying at a nearby table. By the time she reached the science lab for her final period, her patience had worn thin. The room was immaculate, beakers gleaming, surfaces spotless. Marcus had clearly been there recently. After the class emptied, Eliza remained, staring at her failed experiment with mounting anger. She'd never failed at anything in her life, and she wasn't about to start now, especially not with the prestigious Westfield Science Award nominations approaching. In a sudden burst of frustration, she swept her arm across the lab table, sending beakers and test tubes crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass was momentarily satisfying, until she realized the mess she'd created. "Great," she muttered to herself. "Just great." The door to the lab opened, and Marcus appeared, likely drawn by the sound of breaking glass. He assessed the situation silently, his expression unreadable. Eliza felt heat rise to her face, not from embarrassment at her behavior, but from the indignity of being discovered in a moment of weakness by someone she considered beneath her notice. "I'll clean it up," Marcus said quietly, already moving toward the supply closet for a broom. "Yes, well, that is your job, isn't it?" Eliza replied coldly, gathering her belongings. "Make sure you get all the glass. I'll be working in here tomorrow." Without waiting for a response, she strode out of the lab, her footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. Behind her, Marcus carefully swept up the shattered glass, his movements deliberate and practiced. When the floor was clear, he moved to the blackboard where Eliza had scrawled her experimental design. He studied it for a long moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, after ensuring he was completely alone, Marcus picked up a piece of chalk. With quick, confident strokes, he made a small but significant correction to an equation in the corner of the board, a subtle change that would fix the fundamental flaw in Eliza's methodology. It was the instinctive response of a teacher, despite his current role. He stepped back, surveying his work with a critical eye, then nodded once to himself before returning the chalk to its tray. By the time he wheeled his cleaning cart out of the lab, there was no evidence of his presence except for spotless floors and one elegantly corrected equation. The Westfield Academy auditorium hummed with anticipation. Science Symposium Day was a prestigious affair, drawing university recruiters, local dignitaries, and potential donors. Marcus moved silently along the back wall, emptying trash receptacles and ensuring the floors remained spotless. He'd learned to become part of the background, especially during school events. Students and faculty alike seemed to develop a particular blindness to maintenance staff during moments of institutional pride. On stage, Professor Chen adjusted the microphone. Our next presenter has developed a fascinating approach to enzyme kinetics in potential cancer treatments. Please welcome Eliza Harrington. Polite applause filled the auditorium as Eliza took the stage, confidence emanating from every pore. Her presentation materials were impeccable, professionally printed charts, a sleek slideshow, and a scale model of her experimental design. Thank you, Professor Chen, Eliza began, her voice practiced and smooth. My research explores the potential application of modified proteolytic enzymes in targeted cancer therapies. From his position near the back door, Marcus found himself listening intently. The subject matter was familiar territory, his own research had ventured into similar areas, though with different methodological approaches. Eliza continued her presentation with rehearsed precision, moving seamlessly through complex biochemical concepts. When she reached the experimental methodology section, she displayed the equation Marcus had corrected, now incorporated into her work without any acknowledgement of its mysterious appearance. By applying this specific kinetic model, she explained, pointing to the correction Marcus had made, I was able to overcome the previous limitations in enzyme stability. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The equation was working exactly as he'd anticipated. A graduate student from the back asked about the specific derivation of her kinetic model. The equation seems to incorporate elements of the Johnson-Miyazaki approach from last year's neurology conference, he observed. Was that an intentional adaptation? Eliza faltered momentarily. She hadn't recognized the origin of the corrected equation. I developed my approach independently, she recovered quickly. Any similarities to existing models are coincidental. It was a smooth lie, delivered with conviction. But from his position against the wall, Marcus knew better. The equation was indeed a variation of his published work, the Johnson and Johnson-Miyazaki was his own name. As the Q&A continued, Marcus moved to empty a trash can near the stage. His cartwheel caught on an uneven section of flooring, creating a sudden loud squeak that momentarily interrupted Eliza's response. All eyes turned toward the source of the disturbance. Marcus froze, suddenly visible to the entire auditorium. Eliza's expression hardened. As I was saying, she continued pointedly, the application of this methodology requires precise environmental controls. The wheel squeaked again as Marcus attempted to move the cart backward. Excuse me, Eliza snapped, her composure cracking. Is it possible for you to do that later? This is an important presentation. I apologize, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying in the now silent auditorium. Instead of accepting his apology and continuing, Eliza's frustration at the earlier challenging question found its target. You know, some of us are trying to advance scientific knowledge here. We're working on saving lives. Maybe you could be more considerate of that. The audience shifted uncomfortably at the outburst. With all due respect, Ms. Harrington, Professor Chen interjected, let's return to your findings. No, it's fine, Eliza interrupted, her voice taking on a performative patience. I understand he's just doing his job. But perhaps he could do it when we're not discussing life-saving medical research. She turned directly to Marcus, speaking as one might to a child. This is a scientific symposium. Do you understand what that means? The auditorium fell completely silent. Marcus stood perfectly still, his expression neutral despite the public humiliation. "Yes, Ms. Harrington," he said simply. "I understand exactly what it means." Something in his tone, a quiet dignity, perhaps, or a hint of knowledge beyond his station, seemed to momentarily unsettle Eliza. She blinked, then quickly recovered her composure. "Good. So you understand why it's important not to interrupt." She turned back to the audience with a practiced smile. Now, returning to the question about application in varied tissue environments. Marcus quietly wheeled his cart toward the exit, aware of a few sympathetic glances from the audience. As he reached the door, he noticed Professor Chen watching him with an odd expression, not pity, but something closer to curiosity. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary before returning her attention to Eliza's presentation. In that brief exchange, something had shifted. Marcus sensed that, for the first time since arriving at Westfield Academy, he had been truly seen by someone. And that, he knew from experience, could complicate everything. Professor Abigail Chen's footsteps echoed through the empty corridors of the science building. At 11:30 on a Tuesday night, she expected to have the laboratories to herself, a rare luxury that allowed her to pursue her own research beyond the demands of teaching. As she approached the advanced biochemistry lab, she noticed a strip of light beneath the door. The janitorial staff usually finished by 10, and students weren't permitted in the labs without supervision. She hesitated, then quietly turned the handle. The sight that greeted her defied immediate comprehension. Marcus Johnson, the janitor who had been humiliated in the auditorium earlier that day, sat at the main research station, surrounded by open scientific journals, complex molecular modeling displays on a laptop, and pages of handwritten equations. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't immediately notice her presence. Professor Chen watched in astonishment as he referenced a paper, made a notation, and then typed a command into a sophisticated simulation program that even most graduate students struggled to master. "Mr. Johnson," she finally said. Marcus's head snapped up, his expression cycling rapidly from surprise to resignation. "Professor Chen," he acknowledged, already beginning to gather his materials. "I apologize for the intrusion. I was just conducting advanced biochemical research at midnight while employed as our maintenance staff," she completed, stepping further into the room. "Yes, I can see that. The question is why?" Marcus sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. "It's complicated." "I imagine so." She pulled up a stool across from him. "You corrected Eliza Harrington's equation, didn't you? That's why she suddenly had a breakthrough." He neither confirmed nor denied it, but his silence was answer enough. "That equation, it was a variation of the Johnson-Miyazaki approach." Professor Chen studied his face carefully. "You're Dr. Marcus Johnson, aren't you? The neurosurgeon who published that groundbreaking paper on enzyme delivery systems for brain tumors 2 years ago, then seemingly disappeared from the research community." Marcus looked at her steadily. "You have an excellent memory for academic publications, Professor. When they revolutionize my field, yes." She gestured to the papers spread across the table. "What I don't understand is why one of the most promising medical researchers in the country is working as a janitor at a prep school." For a long moment, Marcus was silent, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he closed the laptop. "What I'm about to tell you needs to remain confidential," he said. "My presence here is part of a research project, just not the kind typically conducted in laboratories." Professor Chen nodded for him to continue. "For the past 5 years, I've been developing a medical education initiative aimed at identifying and supporting students from underrepresented backgrounds," Marcus explained. "The program is almost ready to launch, but I needed to understand the educational environment firsthand, particularly the barriers that exist within elite institutions." "So you went undercover as a janitor?" Professor Chen couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. "I needed authenticity," Marcus replied simply. "Observing as a distinguished visiting professor would have given me a skewed perspective. Everyone behaves differently when they know they're being watched by someone they perceive as important. But as maintenance staff, I become invisible, Marcus completed. I see the institution as it truly operates, who gets supported, who gets overlooked, how resources are allocated, what challenges go unaddressed. He gestured to his uniform. This gives me data no survey or formal observation ever could. And why Westfield specifically? Because it feeds directly into the top medical programs in the country. And because the Harrington Foundation is one of the major potential funders for my initiative. I needed to understand the institutional culture before approaching them formally. James Harrington, Professor Chin murmured. Eliza's father. Yes, Marcus confirmed. His foundation has expressed interest in innovative medical education approaches. But funding decisions often reflect personal values and biases, even when they're positioned as purely merit-based assessments. Professor Chen stood, her expression resolute. Your secret is safe with me, Dr. Johnson. But I hope you'll consider sharing your findings with our faculty when this is complete. We could benefit from your insights. As she turned to leave, another thought occurred to her. The equation you corrected for Eliza, why did you help her, after the way she's treated you? Marcus looked up from gathering his papers, his expression thoughtful. Because the science mattered more than the social dynamic. And because everyone deserves the chance to fulfill their potential, even those who start with every advantage. The Westfield Academy Innovation Fair transformed the main hall into a showcase of student brilliance, or at least, student privilege channeled into the appearance of brilliance. For Eliza Harrington, the event represented more than academic achievement. It was her opportunity to impress her father, who had taken a rare afternoon away from the corporate world to attend. James Harrington cut an imposing figure as he moved through the hall, his tailored suit and authoritative bearing drawing deference from everyone around him. The university representatives are particularly interested in your project, Ms. Harrington, Principal Caldwell said, materializing beside her display. I believe Harvard Medical School sent someone specifically to see your demonstration. Of course they did, Eliza replied with practiced confidence, though her stomach tightened with pressure. My research has significant implications for personalized medicine. James Harrington arrived at her station, flanked by several important-looking visitors in formal attire. Eliza, he greeted her with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. These gentlemen are from the National Medical Education Board and Harvard Medical School. I've been telling them about your innovative approach to enzyme stabilization. The pressure in Eliza's chest intensified. Her father had never shown this level of interest in her academic work before. Something was different, something beyond the usual expectations of Harrington excellence. The demonstration proceeded smoothly until the crucial moment, the catalyzation reaction that would visibly demonstrate the enzyme stability under her modified conditions. Eliza added the final reagent with a steady hand, but instead of the expected color change, the solution remained unchanged. She faltered, then tried again with a fresh sample. Still nothing. Perhaps the ambient temperature is affecting the reaction, she suggested, fighting to keep her voice even as panic rose in her throat. Her father's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. I understood this was a proven methodology, Eliza. It is, she insisted, frantically reviewing her procedure for errors. The symposium results were clear. I don't understand what's happening. With practiced social grace, James guided the visitors away from Eliza's failed demonstration, leaving her standing alone amidst her now useless research. When the event finally ended, Eliza remained at her station, methodically packing away her materials while most students celebrated their successes elsewhere. Her father approached, his disappointment palpable. Harringtons don't fail publicly, Eliza. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I don't understand what went wrong. The methodology was sound. Excuses don't change outcomes, he interrupted. I brought those men here specifically to see your work. Do you understand what that means for our family's reputation? Each word landed like a physical blow. I'll fix it. I'll figure out what happened and make it right. After he left, Eliza stood frozen, the careful facade she had maintained all day finally cracking. Tears welled in her eyes despite her desperate attempts to contain them. "Miss Harrington?" The voice startled her. She turned to find Marcus approaching with his cleaning cart. "What?" she snapped, hastily wiping her eyes. "Need me to move so you can mop?" If her harshness affected him, he didn't show it. "I noticed your experiment didn't produce the expected results." "How observant," she said sarcastically. "Is janitorial work not keeping you intellectually stimulated?" Marcus remained unfazed. "Your reagent was compromised. The solution changed color in the hours after you prepared it. That suggests oxidation. Were your containers completely airtight?" Eliza stared at him, confusion momentarily overriding her distress. "How would you know that?" "I clean the labs," he replied simply. "You notice things and you work with the same environments every day." She considered this, her scientific training engaging despite her emotional state. The seal might have been faulty on the storage container, she admitted reluctantly. But that doesn't explain why it worked perfectly during trials yesterday. "Yesterday's ambient temperature was 6 degrees cooler," Marcus pointed out. "The reaction kinetics would have been affected." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "How do you know so much about enzyme kinetics? And why are you helping me?" For a moment, something unreadable flickered across Marcus's face. "Everyone deserves a chance to succeed," he said quietly. "Even people who don't always see others as fully human." The statement hit Eliza with unexpected force. Before she could respond, Marcus continued. "If you adjust your buffer solution pH by approximately 0.3 units, it should compensate for the temperature differential and stabilize your enzymes under these conditions." He turned to leave, but Eliza called after him, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "Why should I trust your advice?" Marcus paused, looking back at her with eyes that suddenly seemed to contain depths she hadn't noticed before. "You shouldn't," he answered simply. "You should verify it scientifically. That's what good researchers do." Later that night, in the empty lab, Eliza tested Marcus's suggestion. When the solution changed to the expected color, her hands trembled not from relief but from a disturbing realization that the janitor she had dismissed and humiliated understood her research better than she did. The note appeared on Eliza's lab station one morning, a simple folded piece of paper containing a chemical equation and 3 words, "Try this approach." The handwriting was unfamiliar, the suggestion unexpected. But the equation itself was elegant, a refinement of her current methodology that addressed several weaknesses she hadn't fully resolved. Over the next week, more notes appeared, always unsigned, always containing insightful adjustments to her research. Under this mysterious guidance, Eliza's project rapidly evolved from merely competent to genuinely innovative. "Your progress is remarkable, Ms. Harrington," Professor Chen commented during class. "Your understanding of enzyme stabilization mechanisms has deepened considerably." Eliza smiled, accepting the praise even as guilt tugged at her conscience. "Thank you, Professor. I've been exploring new approaches." Clearly, Professor Chen replied with an enigmatic smile. "Your methodology now incorporates elements I wouldn't have expected from an undergraduate. Almost as if you had expert consultation." That afternoon, Eliza stayed late in the lab, hoping to catch her anonymous mentor. When the door finally opened, she looked up expectantly, only to find Marcus entering with his cleaning supplies. Her disappointment must have shown on her face because Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Expecting someone else?" "Actually, yes," she admitted. "Someone's been leaving me research notes, but they never sign them. I thought they might show up if I stayed late enough." Marcus began wiping down the countertops, his movements efficient and practiced. "Anonymous help. That's unusual." "It's brilliant help," Eliza said. "Whoever it is understands enzyme kinetics at an advanced level." "And why would they help you anonymously?" Marcus asked, continuing his work without looking at her. The question caught Eliza off guard. "I don't know." Perhaps they have their reasons for remaining in the background, he suggested. Not everyone seeks recognition for their contributions. Something in his tone made Eliza look at him more carefully. You know who it is, don't you? Marcus smiled slightly but didn't answer directly. The science is what matters, isn't it? Not who provides the insight. In the real world, credit matters, Eliza countered. Reputation, recognition, authorship, that's how careers are built. Is that why you do science? Marcus asked, pausing his work to look at her directly. For recognition. The question felt unexpectedly personal. I do science because. Eliza hesitated, realizing she rarely considered her true motivations. Because I'm good at it. Because it's expected of me. The Harrington name has a legacy in pharmaceuticals. But not because you're passionate about its potential to improve lives. Eliza bristled slightly. That's easy to say when you don't have family expectations weighing on you. And if you could choose freely? Marcus pressed gently. What would science mean to you then? The question lingered in the air between them, strangely intimate. Eliza found herself answering more honestly than she had intended. I do care about the applications, she admitted quietly. When my mother had cancer 3 years ago, I saw firsthand how brutal treatments can be. If enzymes like the ones I'm studying could reduce those side effects. She trailed off, suddenly self-conscious about revealing so much. Marcus nodded, something like approval warming his gaze. That's a purpose worth pursuing. An uncomfortable silence fell between them as Eliza realized she was having a meaningful conversation with someone she had previously seen as merely part of the building's maintenance system. Principal Caldwell interrupted their conversation, addressing Marcus coldly. Johnson, when you've finished here, my office needs attention. Actually, Principal Caldwell, Eliza said, surprising herself, Marcus was helping me understand a contamination issue with my experiment. His insights were quite valuable. Both men looked at her with different variations of surprise. After they left, Eliza remained troubled by her own unexpected defense of the janitor and the principal's dismissive attitude. In her lab journal that night, she wrote, "Purpose matters more than recognition. Maybe I've been asking the wrong questions all along." The spring charity gala transformed Westfield Academy's gymnasium into an elegant venue. For Westfield students, the annual event was mandatory attendance, an opportunity, as Principal Caldwell put it, to demonstrate social graces befitting future leaders. Eliza arrived in a designer gown that complemented her father's formal attire. James Harrington moved through the crowd with practiced charm, one hand perpetually clasping the shoulders of potential business connections. As she navigated through clusters of well-dressed guests, Eliza noticed the support staff stationed discreetly along the walls. Marcus stood near the refreshment table, dressed in a more formal version of his work uniform, attending to any spills or messes with quiet efficiency. Their eyes met briefly across the room. He gave her a small nod of acknowledgement before returning his attention to his duties. Something about his presence made her increasingly uncomfortable, not because he was there, but because of how everyone, including herself until recently, treated him as if he weren't. Principal Caldwell was midway through announcing a new science wing donation when a commotion erupted near the dessert table. "Help! Someone help!" a student's voice cried out. People turned to see Sophia Washington, a scholarship student known for her academic brilliance, collapse to the floor. She clutched at her throat, her breathing labored and wheezing. The school nurse pushed through, kneeling beside Sophia. Her pulse is racing, and her lips are turning blue. Does anyone know if she has any medical conditions? Confusion rippled through the onlookers. The nurse fumbled in her emergency kit, clearly uncertain about the appropriate intervention. "We need to call an ambulance," Principal Caldwell declared. "And does anyone here have medical training?" Marcus moved swiftly through the crowd, kneeling beside Sophia's trembling form. "Anaphylaxis," he stated with calm certainty, examining her rapidly developing hives and listening to her labored breathing. "Likely from the nut oils in the pastry she consumed." He turned to the nurse's kit, quickly locating and preparing an epinephrine injection with the practiced movements of someone with extensive medical training. The entire room watched in stunned silence as the janitor administered the injection with precise, confident technique. "Elevate her legs," he instructed the nurse, who complied automatically. "And we need to monitor her blood pressure." Eliza stepped forward, removing her expensive watch. "I'll time it." Within minutes, Sophia's breathing eased significantly. Color returned to her face as the medication counteracted the severe allergic reaction. As the immediate crisis passed, awareness of the extraordinary scene seemed to ripple through the crowd. Murmurs grew louder. How did the janitor know exactly what to do? James Harrington pushed to the front, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning recognition. "Johnson? Marcus Johnson?" Marcus met his gaze steadily but said nothing, still focused on monitoring Sophia's condition. The paramedics arrived, taking over Sophia's care. As they prepared to transport her to the hospital, one of them turned to Marcus. "You administer the epinephrine. Good call. Where did you train?" Before Marcus could answer, James Harrington stepped forward. "Perhaps Mr. Johnson could explain that to all of us," he said, his voice cutting through the background noise. "Along with why a neurosurgeon with 3 advanced degrees is working as a janitor at my daughter's school." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Eliza stared at her father, then at Marcus, trying to process this revelation. "You know him?" "I know of him," James replied without taking his eyes off Marcus. Dr. Marcus Johnson was one of the most promising neurosurgeons in the country before he mysteriously disappeared from the medical community 2 years ago. All eyes turned to Marcus, who stood calmly amidst the chaos he had just managed. For the first time since arriving at Westfield, he allowed his true self to emerge fully, his posture straightening, his expression reflecting the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. "It was you," Eliza whispered. "The notes. The equation corrections. It was all you." Marcus nodded once, a simple acknowledgement that somehow changed everything. The Westfield Academy library had never been so quiet. Students huddled over laptops and phones, consuming every bit of information they could find about Dr. Marcus Johnson. 3 patents for neurosurgical instruments, one student reported in an awed whisper. "A MacArthur Genius Grant recipient," added another. The collective research painted a picture of a brilliant medical mind, a young surgeon who had risen from modest beginnings to the pinnacle of his profession before inexplicably disappearing from public view 2 years earlier. Eliza sat alone in a corner of the library, her own research taking a different direction. While others focused on Marcus's medical achievements, she found herself drawn to his background, the parts of his story that had nothing to do with accolades or recognition. Born to a single mother in South Chicago. Full scholarship to Howard University. Working nights as a hospital orderly while attending medical school. Establishing a free clinic in an underserved neighborhood even as his career soared. Each detail forced her to confront her own prejudices, the automatic assumptions she had made about him based solely on his uniform and job title. "Doing some research, Ms. Harrington?" Professor Chen asked, finding Eliza in the library. "You knew who he was all along," Eliza said accusingly. "Not all along. But I discovered his identity a few weeks ago." "What possible reason could justify such deception?" "Perhaps that's something you should ask him directly, once you've finished looking into your father's connection to all this." Later that evening, Eliza accessed the Harrington Foundation's database using her father's credentials. The search term Marcus Johnson yielded immediate results, a grant proposal titled Breaking Barriers, Redesigning Medical Education for Diverse Talent Pipelines. The proposal had progressed through multiple review stages with glowing evaluations before being abruptly declined 6 months earlier. The rejection note, written by her father personally, cited methodological concerns and unrealistic implementation parameters. Her father's email to the Foundation's board members revealed more. Johnson's approach threatens the established pathways that have served the medical community for generations. His assertion that elite institutions perpetuate systemic barriers through implicit gatekeeping directly challenges the meritocracy upon which our own success was built. Marcus had resubmitted a revised proposal 3 months ago. It was currently under review, with her father assigned as the primary evaluator. The decision deadline was just 2 weeks away. The implications struck her with stunning clarity. Marcus hadn't come to Westfield randomly. He had deliberately placed himself in the institution most connected to his proposal's potential funder, perhaps to understand why his initial submission had been rejected, perhaps to gather evidence for his resubmission. Eliza closed the laptop, her mind racing. For the first time, she found herself questioning not just her own prejudices but the entire system of privilege she had taken for granted. Who decided which innovations were too disruptive to support? Who determined which voices deserved to be heard? And what happened to potentially transformative ideas when they challenged those already in power? Finding Marcus proved surprisingly difficult. On a hunch, Eliza drove to Westfield late that night, using her family's access key to enter the deserted building. The light beneath the laboratory door confirmed her suspicion. When she pushed it open, Marcus looked up from packing his research materials, his expression guarded. "Ms. Harrington," he acknowledged. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Apparently there's a lot of unexpected things happening lately," she replied. "Like discovering the janitor who's been cleaning my lab is actually a famous neurosurgeon conducting some kind of undercover social experiment." Marcus winced slightly at her tone. "It's not quite as theatrical as that sounds." "Then explain it to me," Eliza challenged, crossing her arms. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you deliberately infiltrated my school under false pretenses to manipulate my father's foundation. Is that what James is saying?" Marcus asked quietly. "My father doesn't know I'm here," Eliza admitted. "But I found your grant proposal in the foundation database. I know he rejected your first submission and that you reapplied. What I don't understand is why you resorted to this." She gestured at his janitor's uniform. Marcus set down the papers he'd been gathering. "Would you have given me the time of day if I'd approached you as an outside researcher studying elite educational environments? Would any student here have shown their true behaviors if they knew they were being observed?" The questions hung uncomfortably in the air. "Your father rejected my proposal not because of its scientific or educational merit, but because it challenged his worldview," Marcus continued. "I needed to understand exactly what I was up against, what mindsets and institutional structures maintained the status quo even when presented with evidence that change was necessary." "So you've been what, studying us like lab rats?" Eliza's voice rose with indignation. "Taking notes on our behavior to use in your research?" "I've been observing patterns," Marcus corrected calmly. "The ways in which privilege blinds people to structural barriers. The assumptions made about intelligence and capability based on job titles or appearance." He held her gaze steadily. "The casual cruelty that comes when people believe certain work makes others beneath their notice." Eliza flushed, remembering her own dismissive treatment of him. "That's not fair. You were deliberately deceiving everyone." "Was I?" Marcus challenged. "I never claimed to be anything other than the person maintaining your facilities. The deception was in what you assumed about my education, my intelligence, and my worth based on that role." The truth of his words stung more than Eliza wanted to admit. She changed tactics. "The notes you left me, why help me if I was just part of your study?" Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Because despite everything, I'm still a doctor and an educator at heart. I saw potential in your research. And perhaps—" He hesitated, "perhaps I hoped that by experiencing the value of input from someone you dismissed, you might begin questioning other assumptions." Eliza processed this, her anger gradually yielding to a more complex emotion. "My father's holding an emergency meeting tomorrow about your situation. He's preparing for media attention." "I expected as much," Marcus nodded, returning to his packing. The confrontation at the gala left little room for continued anonymity. "What will you do now?" "Complete my research. Present my findings." Continue advocating for changes to a medical education system that excludes too many brilliant minds because they don't fit predetermined molds. Eliza hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling her most. Was any of it real? Our conversations? Your advice? Or was I just a convenient case study in privilege? Marcus paused, looking at her with unexpected gentleness. Eliza, the fundamental principle of my work is that people contain depths beyond our initial categorizations of them. That principle applies to everyone, including you. For the first time, he used her first name rather than the formal, Ms. Harrington, and something in the simple humanity of the gesture broke through her remaining defenses. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For how I treated you. For not seeing you as a person. That's a beginning, Marcus acknowledged. The harder question is what you'll do with that awareness moving forward. Eliza thought of her father's dismissive email, the foundation meeting, the potential burial of Marcus's transformative proposal. A sense of determination rose within her. I think, she said slowly, I might finally have a purpose worth pursuing. The Harrington Foundation's annual donor gala transformed the grand ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel into a showcase of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with arrangements of rare orchids. A string quartet played classical music as attendees in formal attire engaged in the delicate dance of philanthropy and social positioning. James Harrington moved through the crowd with practiced charm, shaking hands and accepting compliments on the foundation's recent initiatives. If he was concerned about the impending discussion of Marcus Johnson's proposal, his confident demeanor revealed nothing. Eliza observed her father from across the room, seeing him with new eyes. The past 3 days had transformed her understanding not just of Marcus Johnson but of her own family's role in maintaining systems of exclusion wrapped in the language of merit and tradition. You seem deep in thought, Professor Chin commented, appearing beside her. Ready for tonight's presentation? As ready as I'll ever be, Eliza replied, smoothing her gown nervously. The professor squeezed her arm encouragingly. What you're doing takes tremendous courage. Remember that. The Foundation's executive director approached the podium. Good evening, distinguished guests. Before we begin our dinner, Mr. Harrington has a special announcement regarding our medical education initiative. James stood to enthusiastic applause, adjusting his bow tie before addressing the crowd. Thank you, everyone. The Harrington Foundation has always been committed to supporting excellence in medical education. As he continued outlining the Foundation's established approach to grant-making, Eliza made her way to the side entrance of the ballroom. Her heart pounded as she opened the door, gesturing to the figure waiting in the hallway. Marcus Johnson entered quietly, drawing surprised looks from nearby guests. Gone was the janitor's uniform, replaced by a perfectly tailored tuxedo that transformed his appearance completely. He carried himself with the natural confidence of someone accustomed to professional respect, a stark contrast to the deliberately self-effacing posture he had maintained at Westfield. And so, we will be announcing our latest round of grants next month, continuing our tradition of supporting initiatives that maintain the highest standards of medical excellence, James concluded. Actually, Father, Eliza said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room. I believe there's one proposal the board should consider immediately. James turned, his expression freezing as he spotted Marcus standing beside his daughter. Eliza, he said warningly. This is neither the time nor the place. I disagree, she replied, her voice stronger than she'd expected. When better to discuss the future of medical education than at an event dedicated to precisely that purpose? Murmurs rippled through the crowd as guests recognized the tension unfolding before them. Ladies and gentlemen, Eliza continued, addressing the room at large. Many of you know me as James Harrington's daughter, heir to the Harrington legacy in pharmaceuticals and philanthropy. What you may not know is that until recently, I shared many of my father's assumptions about merit, opportunity, and who deserves a place in elite institutions. She gestured toward Marcus. This is Dr. Marcus Johnson, one of the most innovative neurosurgeons in the country. For the past 2 months, he has been working as a janitor at Westfield Academy, my school, as part of his research into the barriers facing non-traditional students in medical education. The whispers grew louder. James Harrington's face darkened as he realized the direction of his daughter's speech. Dr. Johnson submitted a grant proposal to the Harrington Foundation 6 months ago, Eliza continued. A proposal that received unanimous support from our scientific reviewers but was ultimately rejected by the board, by my father, for challenging established pathways to medical careers. Eliza, that's enough, James snapped, striding toward her. You're embarrassing yourself and this foundation. No, father, she replied steadily. What's embarrassing is using our privilege to maintain systems that exclude brilliant minds simply because they don't fit our preconceived notions of what a doctor looks like or where they should come from. She turned back to the audience. Dr. Johnson's proposal doesn't just expand opportunities for underrepresented students, it redesigns medical education to identify and nurture talent regardless of background. And he's gathered compelling evidence of the need for this approach through his undercover work. Marcus stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. I was observing institutional patterns, he clarified. As a black man in a service role, I became functionally invisible to most people at Westfield, allowing me to witness authentic behaviors and biases that would have been hidden from a visiting researcher. He looked directly at James Harrington. What I discovered was both troubling and hopeful. The same brilliant students who could recite the Hippocratic Oath would walk past suffering without seeing it if that suffering wore a maintenance uniform. But when given the opportunity to move beyond their assumptions, some demonstrated remarkable capacity for growth and compassion. His gaze shifted to Eliza, a silent acknowledgement of her evolution. This is absurd, James sputtered. You infiltrated a school under false pretenses to gather ammunition for your rejected proposal. That's not research, it's deception. Is it deception to reveal uncomfortable truths? Marcus countered. Or is the real deception in claiming to support medical innovation while systematically excluding voices that might disrupt the status quo? The room had fallen completely silent, the audience captivated by the unfolding drama. My proposal doesn't threaten medical excellence, Marcus continued, addressing the broader audience. It expands our definition of who can contribute to that excellence. The data is clear, diverse medical teams produce better patient outcomes. Yet our current system continues to create physicians who primarily come from privileged backgrounds, creating persistent gaps in care and research priorities. As Marcus outlined the specifics of his proposal, the early identification program, the redesigned admissions criteria, the mentorship structure, Eliza watched her father's expression shift from anger to reluctant consideration. When Marcus finished, an elderly trustee broke the silence. Mr. Harrington, is there a reason the board dismissed this proposal despite positive reviews? It sounds both innovative and aligned with our stated commitment to excellence. James hesitated, visibly weighing his options. The foundation had concerns about implementation challenges. And yes, perhaps concerns about disruption to established pathways that have served the profession well. Served some of the profession well, Eliza corrected quietly. Her father shot her a look before continuing. However, in light of Dr. Johnson's unconventional research methodology and the new evidence he's gathered, perhaps the proposal deserves reconsideration. It was a minimal concession, carefully worded to save face. But Eliza recognized it as the opening it was. I move that we convene a special review session, she said formally, utilizing her technical position as a junior board member for the first time. With Dr. Johnson present to address implementation questions directly. The motion carried surprisingly quickly, with several board members expressing particular interest in the potential for expanded talent identification and the positive press such an innovative approach might generate. As the evening transitioned back to its planned program, Eliza found herself standing between two worlds, the privileged environment she had always known and the broader perspective Marcus had helped her glimpse. This is just the beginning, Marcus said quietly, joining her at the edge of the ballroom. Real change takes sustained effort and constant vigilance against the pull of comfortable traditions. I know, Eliza replied. But it's a beginning I'm proud to be part of. 6 months later, the Westfield Academy auditorium buzzed with anticipation. Students, faculty, and community members filled every seat, drawn by the unusual announcement of a special presentation on reimagining educational pathways. On stage, Principal Caldwell adjusted the microphone nervously. Today marks an important milestone for our institution. As many of you know, recent events have prompted us to examine our practices and assumptions more critically. Understatement of the year, Eliza thought, seated in the front row. The revelation of Marcus Johnson's true identity and purpose had created shockwaves throughout Westfield and beyond. Local media had initially framed it as a scandal before the narrative evolved into a more nuanced examination of educational access and unconscious bias. We are honored to welcome back Dr. Marcus Johnson, Principal Caldwell continued, this time in his true capacity as a distinguished neurosurgeon and educational innovator. Alongside him, our own Eliza Harrington will discuss their collaborative initiative. Applause filled the auditorium as Marcus and Eliza took the stage. He was dressed in a professional suit that carried the same quiet dignity as his janitor's uniform had, though the audience's response to him now couldn't have been more different. 6 months ago, I stood in this room with a mop and bucket, Marcus began, his resonant voice commanding attention. Many of you looked past me daily, not out of malice, but because our social training teaches us to categorize people quickly, to determine who merits our full attention and who serves merely as background to our own stories. He gestured toward the audience. That experience reinforced what I already knew from my journey to medicine: our systems consistently overlook brilliance when it appears in unexpected packages. Marcus outlined the Breaking Barriers initiative, now fully funded by the Harrington Foundation, a comprehensive program to identify promising students from underrepresented backgrounds and provide them with mentorship, academic support, and clear pathways to medical careers. When he finished, Eliza stepped forward. The past 6 months had changed her in ways visible beyond her more subdued clothing and simplified hairstyle. There was a thoughtfulness to her bearing now, a humility tempered with purpose. Many of you knew me as someone who took privilege for granted, she began frankly. I moved through Westfield expecting deference and overlooking anyone I deemed unimportant to my success. Dr. Johnson could have exposed my behavior publicly, using me as an example of everything wrong with elite education. Eliza smiled slightly. Instead, he did something far more radical: he saw potential in me that I hadn't recognized in myself. The hardest lesson was realizing that the systems benefiting me were actively harming others, she admitted. That my success wasn't solely the result of merit but also of accumulated advantage, resources, connections, and assumptions of competence that others never received. After the presentation, Sophia Washington approached them. Thank you both, not just for the program, but for showing us that systems can change. Eliza noticed her father standing at the back of the auditorium. He had maintained a careful distance from the initiative's public aspects but had come to witness his daughter's transformation. He came, she said, surprised. Sometimes trying is where transformation begins, Marcus observed. For individuals and institutions alike. As they walked out of the auditorium, the former janitor and the former princess of privilege, now colleagues in a shared mission, students greeted them both with equal respect, having learned perhaps the most important lesson of all, that human worth exists independently of titles, appearances, or social position. In the hallway where Eliza had once mockingly told Marcus he'd missed a spot, a new plaque commemorated the Breaking Barriers Medical Pathway Program, looking beyond appearances to find the healers of tomorrow. It was a beginning, a small one against entrenched patterns of privilege. But as both Marcus and Eliza had discovered, beginnings sometimes contained more potential than anyone could initially see. Dear friend, this story reminds us that human dignity transcends titles and appearances. Every day, we categorize people quickly, deciding who deserves our full attention and who becomes merely background in our personal narratives. Yet the most important connections often come when we look beyond these superficial judgments. True transformation begins when we recognize that systems benefiting some may silently harm others, and that merit is often confused with accumulated advantage. By questioning our assumptions about who belongs where, we open doors not just for others but for our own growth and understanding. If this message touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that challenge prejudice and celebrate human potential in all its forms. Together, we can build a world that sees beyond appearances.